Hans, welcome back to Conservative Commander Radio Show.
Thank you.
Well, we're glad to have you on here. Rick and I have had quite the day here. There's no lack of things to talk about today, and we've been looking forward to you being here with us because I want to move into the issue of Obamacare, which you are an authority on. You've written a recent blog that I want to talk to you about, but you know, we've talked a lot about it on this program. Anybody who has any eyes at all to see what's going on have been seeing this thing coming as a train wreck, as some even the Democrats have talked about it coming. Well, October 1st is here. And no matter where you turn, it seems today, the news just keeps piling on about this disaster that Obamacare is. You've written a great piece. I want to ask you some questions about it here right now. I mean, we know that Obamacare, for anybody who looked at objectively, is socialism. We know increasingly, as we've seen, it's very anti-Christian, really, from the standpoint of what it requires. But you've written a piece now that also states that not is it just those things, perhaps, but Obamacare is pointedly anti-marriage.
Right.
Why do you say this?
Well, you get a much better deal if you're divorced or you're an unmarried couple living together than if you get married. For example, if you've got a husband making $70,000 a year working full-time and the wife's making $23,000 working part-time, and they go to one of these Obamacare health insurance exchanges, they'll pay $7,000 more a year, effectively, because of the fact that
wait a minute. Say that again now. If you go to a health insurance exchange, you're going to pay $7,000 plus more a year if you, no other difference, but just if you're married?
Right. If you're married, you pay $7,000 more a year because you don't get taxpayer subsidies.
Well, see, that's an astounding thing. I wonder how many people have known about that. I don't think I was aware of a number that large.
I wasn't aware of this until relatively recently, but apparently Phyllis Schlafly wrote about this back in 2010, but for some strange reason did not get much attention. There are a lot of things wrong with Obamacare that people didn't really catch until after it was passed, like there are huge work disincentives in it that didn't really get much attention, and it may not have been fully intentional. But this was discussed, at least by a few people, at the time. So the Democrats knew that this discrimination against married people was in the bill, and it didn't bother them to include it. They included it quite knowingly. And the differences are huge. I mean, the discrimination against married couples is just huge, because that couple I described, if they weren't married to each other, they could get a huge taxpayer subsidy for their health insurance premiums on the Obamacare exchange.
See, Hans, I look at that based on what you're saying and say this. The Obamacare legislation actually has built within it financial penalties,
right,
which it says to married couples in a practical sense, if you haven't considered getting a divorce, now you've got a reason to consider it. And if you're not married and having trouble to meet your bills as it is, don't even think about getting married. I mean,
right,
outside a moral consideration, what reason is there to get married?
It's very peculiar, and the differences are huge, and it gets even bigger when you have older people whose premiums are somewhat higher because older people consume more health care. So if you've got a 60-year-old couple with equal incomes and no kids, and they make $62,041 a year, they can save $11,000 a year by getting divorced or by remaining unmarried, because they get a huge amount of taxpayer subsidies at that age on some of these Obamacare health insurance exchanges. But they only get those taxpayer subsidies if they're not married. So there's this colossal subsidy you get for your expensive insurance if you're older, because older people can be charged more for insurance. But you only get it if you are divorced or you're living together without getting married.
See, this is an about turn from everything that we would say is American. You went on, though, not just you brought up another point, not just is there a marriage penalty, as you use the word, discrimination against those who are married. You're also saying that it also penalizes the very work ethic. Now, we know, I mean, everybody knows that if they've been listening at all, that there are disincentives in the bill for employers, meaning that's why we have the highest number of part-time workers, I think, in this country than we've ever had, because employers are actually going to be charged more if they have full-time employees. So there's a disincentive for employers. But you brought up the point that there's also a disincentive or a penalty for the individual who chooses to work rather than sitting at home on their hands. Explain that, would you?
Well, you get these big taxpayer subsidies for these overpriced policies on the health insurance exchanges, which is why many people will sign up. I mean, they'll sign up for a policy even if it's rather expensive, as the taxpayers are paying for most of it. But these taxpayer subsidies phase out really quick, and they phase out so fast at certain income levels that if your income goes up a tiny little bit, you lose thousands of dollars worth of subsidies. So you'd better not work more. You better try and reduce the number of hours you work if you're an hourly worker, or you better find a way to just, do a less demanding job to avoid your income going beyond a certain level, to avoid losing your thousands and thousands of dollars of taxpayer subsidies for your health care exchange policy. So you've got a 62-year-old in a high-cost area, like, say, New York or something, earning $46,000 a year without health insurance. He or she can get a $7,800 government tax credit. But if that person increases their income by just $22, they lose the entire $7,800 tax credit.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. So much for graduated income taxes, huh? Or taxes.
No, it effectively works like not like a 40% income tax marginal tax rate. It works at a 35,618% marginal tax rate over that $20 increase in income. Because if your income goes up, not $20, $1. If your income goes up from $46,021 to $46,022, your income goes up by $1. You can lose the entire $7,800 credit. And
which means the tendency is then, Hans, if I'm a worker, which we're all in that category, I don't even want to get close to that number lest I go $1 over.